All right, welcome everyone. Today we're going over mental health for athletes. We have a great panel of guests today. Going to share some of their experiences, some of their stories of how they travel through life as athletes and just everyday living. So before I start every webinar, I always give this disclaimer because we're educating, but let's make sure if you have any issues from the mental health perspective, make sure you contact a licensed professional. This is intended to educate and inform on different topics on mental health and performance. All right, so with that being said, I'll just go over everyone's name, who's in here, and then I guess one at a time you can introduce yourself and give whatever you want to add to it. So Rashard Matthews wasn't able to attend today. He wasn't feeling too well, but hopefully he gets better. So we have today TJ Wallasch, 2022 Winter Olympian or U.S. Winter Olympian, Phaidra Knight, Hall of Fame rugby player and MMA competitor, and Jared Firestone, Team Israel skeleton athlete. So if you want us to start off, just give a brief introduction to yourself.
I guess I was introduced first. I'm Tyler Wallasch. I race ski cross for the United States, which is an event that's 4 people going at the same time down a big mountain with big jumps, bank turns, and the first one down wins. Pretty straightforward in concept. Competition level, it gets a little more complicated. But yeah, I travel mostly in Europe, but chasing snow in the winter and trying to go fast and win competitions.
All right, nice.
I'm Phaidra Knight. I am a former international rugby player. Played for 18 years for the U.S., played about 20 years total during my career. Rugby is rugby. I played both 15s and 7s under the rugby union code. And currently fighting as a mixed martial artist. I've been doing that been training for it for almost 3 years. Been actually fighting for about a year now. So just gonna see how far and how long that will go.
I'm Jared Firestone, Israel skeleton athlete on the World Cup team for Israel, and skeleton, similar to bobsled or luge, but we're the ones who run, jump on the sled, go on our stomachs face first, about 85 miles an hour down an ice chute. Do this mostly in Park City, Lake Placid, a lot of time in Europe. And it's an exciting sport. You got to have your mind sharp to do it.
Definitely. All right, thanks everyone. And the next slide, I have a quick word from Julianna Peña. She couldn't make it today, but she put up, for those out there who didn't see this, I put this on my page earlier, but she gave a little to her 2 cents into the topic. I'll play that.
Hey you guys, UFC Bantamweight Champion of the World, Julianna Peña. Thank you so much for joining this, brought to you guys by Nick, the cognitive coach. He's the best. Shout out to Nick. I just wanted to say that the ways that I overcome my stress, my anxiety, anytime I'm having mental issues, I take it out at the gym. I go to the gym, I live in the gym, and that usually makes me feel a lot better. You know, there were times where people counted me out, nobody thought I was going to win, and I had to have the mental fortitude and the mental toughness to not care what the naysayers were saying, to not really give in to that kind of pressure. I look at pressure as a privilege, and I looked at that challenge and I met it head on. I fought fire with fire and I went right into it. So always gamble on yourself, always bet on yourself, and be willing to put in the mental work and the mental toughness and all of the mental tasks that you need in order to make your mind sharp so that you feel confident going into every challenge and obstacle that you're going to overcome. I hope you guys are having a great day, and I hope that you guys enjoy this seminar.
Right. So those are the words from Julianna. Everyone on this panel has, like I said before, has a story to tell. So we'll get started. So basically how we'll do this, I'll just go over a few bullet points, and it'll just be an open talk on how do you resonate with it, things you've experienced in your life, or input you want to put on it. So stress. So a lot of people talk about stress, and it's usually given a bad name. Now, typically when I teach this to clients, I talk about distress and eustress. So distress is negative things that impact you and hinder your performance, while eustress is things that make your performance more productive, because a lot of people get the notion that you're not going to go through anything. So I always say it's good to identify what you can control and what you can't, and be able to figure out how to use it to your advantage and have different outlets to utilize the stress, whether it's a hobby, a person you talk to, whatever it may be. So with that being said, what are your guys' takes on stress? You can, like I said, bounce around. Whoever wants to go, share your experience on how you utilize stress, how you experience in your own sport, and just life in general.
So I think in skeleton, it's a very tense sport, and being such an individual sport, there's a lot of tension and stress around almost every interaction you have. So one of the things I do is always have breathing techniques when I do get my quiet space. When I show up to the track, do some deep breathing, get in touch with how I'm feeling, my body, the mind-body connection that day. And when I'm not sliding, just try to stay loose, get your head off of the sport or what's stressing you out, play some ping pong video games, and basically just try to keep it loose.
Well, stress for me, I guess, was a bit more easy to manage during an actual competitive event when I was playing rugby, because it would immediately dissipate, right? You'd have a bit of stress. You could go out and run and hit someone with little to no consequence, right, to you. That has since changed a bit since I've changed sports, and now with MMA, I find that if there's stress or any sort of anxiety that I'm experiencing prior to a fight, I have to manage it definitely before the fight. And most certainly it's something much like Jared, I take to sort of breathing techniques, and depending on what level of anxiety, what level of stress I'm experiencing, I will adapt to a certain sort of breathing protocol. But yeah, it's I think, there are some circumstances where stress is awesome because it actually triggers a response that of a bit more, what was the word I'm looking for? There's a bit more emphasis put on what you're doing. There's a bit more attention put on what you're doing, or at least for me. But then there's obviously a downside, right? There's a tipping point where you have to then be able to sort of alleviate the stress. And yeah, relying on in competition on breathing is key. Meditation and things like that are key. But it's also, as you've mentioned, Nick, it's great to have people that you can just kind of talk to in sort of different scenarios, folks you can talk to. A pet can sometimes be an absorber of stress. And so that's quite helpful as well.
That's good responses. Like a lot of people, especially what I've noticed, is they always try to make it as close as possible to their sport. But it's good, like you said, with a pet, that's completely irrelevant. So it's cool. I know, Jared, I know your dog, you recently lost your dog, but I know that was a big part of your life too. How about you?
Definitely. I've noticed more gray hairs since then without having that stress relief.
How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, it's funny that Phaidra mentioned the transition from rugby to MMA. I used to play American football just through high school, but you had a lot more time to settle into a game, and I miss that in ski cross, my sport now that I've done professionally for the last 10 years. When you're in the start gate, you can go out in the first round, or we have qualifying. That's our timed run by yourself against the clock. And the level ski cross is at internationally, on a minute and 10-second course, you'll have 32 guys go to the final, and everyone's within a second. And when you kind of put everyone on a map, that's about 6 feet difference between first place and the last person into the final. Typically it's about 6 feet. And then going into the final, you have into the races, you have 3 guys next to you trying to beat you to the bottom, and they'll do anything they can to be in front of you. And it's much different than when I was playing a team sport or a longer duration sport where you could settle into a game. You got to be settled in 5 minutes before you're in the start gate. And so the stress is very different. And I think a lot about what Phaidra said about that first hit gets out of the way. In ski cross, it's the gate drop, and that's the first hit, and you better be ready for that gate drop and that first hit. Typically it's kind of reiterating what the other guy said. It's a lot of breathing. I actually found this year I tend to do a little self-talk, and I don't have any like planned words I say to myself, but I'll be in the start gate and I kind of do this thing where I squat down, I hold the handles, get a little stretch. And I'm just mumbling to myself, saying how great I am, how hard I worked, whatever comes to my mind that's going to help me just get fired up. And then I'll do a lot of visualization of the track. We have a lot of stuff to memorize when we're on a course. And I just go over that game plan. And that's something that I can control, is knowing my own game plan, how I'm going to ski features, how I'm going to take a turn, what my line is. It's going to change. Other guys are going to get in the way. They're going to try to impose their will. But in the start gate, at least I can go through my motions mentally. And that really kind of puts me back in the driver's seat before that gate drops for that first hit.
You guys all individual sport athletes, so I see a lot of similarities on how you guys prepare versus like a team sport, like you said, so much more to it. So I guess that's a good segue to the next topic on athletic identity. I know, Phaidra, you have your hands in a lot of pots. You're getting into acting. I think you say you're working on a documentary. So it's like, who are you as an athlete? Because on one side of the athletic identity spectrum, you're talking about, okay, I need to perform, I need to be engaged, I need to train, and you have to have that. There's no way around it. You guys did not get to where you're at by taking days off. But at the same time, who are you outside of the sport? And I teach my young athletes this a lot, because how do you interpret losses, defeat? Is it because you had a bad game or bad race, bad match? Or is it because you're just a mess up, you're a screw up, whatever you want to call it? And a lot of people, it sounds so cut and dry, but I've seen it through my career. A lot of people really take those losses as if they're less of a person, instead of like, this game wasn't my day, or this match or this fight, whatever it may be. And I finding that balance, it doesn't have to look like 50-50. A lot of people say you need to find balance 50-50, but if it means you're with your team or in your actual sport more often, that's fine, but it still needs to be that shift. So yeah, what do you guys take on like that balance? How does athletic identity affect you and you're dealing with the feed, and how that affects you in your daily life?
I, as a, athlete, all of those components, athlete, actress, or actor, entrepreneur, they're all parts of who I am holistically, right? So I have an identity. I'm Phaidra, and being an athlete is one element of that. It's just one part. And so I think it's really important, especially in moments of defeat, right? Because those are the times when we question ourselves the absolute most. We kind of go to the most profound place. It's not a thing that defines who I am. It's just a part of me, and a part that obviously, if it's defeat, things didn't quite work out the way I planned, and so it's back to the drawing board. But it's interesting. And it's a difficult thing, and it certainly takes time and maturity to reach that point where you can sort of step aside, look at yourself from an observer position, and step out sort of outside of your body, to see these different parts and to be able to manage those parts. It's balance is key. I spend, the lion's share of my time training as an athlete. I train full time. And because I'm an older athlete, the full time goes into double time because of recovery is so imperative. And there's just so much more required there. But there are days built in, right? So I do have days off, where I build in and have balance and create, time to manage the other parts of what makes, me Phaidra Knight. And so it's a difficult balance, no doubt. And it's no identical blueprint from week to week. It changes. The only thing is really that constant is the actual training, MMA training. So everything else, I have to sort of have that flexibility, but I understand this is not going to last. It's not going to last 20 years, certainly not going to last 18 to 20 years like my rugby career. But I'm on a finite sort of timeline, and I'm giving it everything I have, and everything else I'm balancing around it, and also have, a support group. And I think that's really important. And it's also, I think, something to be factored into the athletic identity as well. It's finding, like you say, having teammates and having friends, but having teammates and flanks in every element, right? Not just in the sport, but having teammates and people that can help build the vision and the team around the other parts. So it's just important to keep perspective and to step out sometimes when you go through those moments of failure, and even when you go through those moments of success. It's all relative. And whether you fail or whether you succeed, it's a moment, it's a time of reflection. It's a time to take a step back and maybe examine how you could do things a little differently, how you can do things a bit better. If you can keep that sort of, and that's something I didn't have this perspective necessarily when I was playing rugby, but as a fighter, you win, you lose, within a fight. You may win the overall fight, but there are losses taken there. And so you learn how to just kind of go with the, no pun intended, you learn how to roll with the punches, right? So yeah, it's interesting, but I will defer to the other two gentlemen.
Well, I had a question actually for Phaidra. Do you think your that finite feeling of your athletic career now switching into MMA, and you said, yeah, there's a time limit on, all athletic endeavors really have a time limit on them to be the best. Sure. Do you think that's benefited your training with that, like, maturity and realization of that compared to when you were younger playing rugby and like starting your rugby career?
Absolutely. When I started playing rugby, there was I had no idea of what I'm talking about right now. Right. There's no concept. And it's hard to know it and to have it when you're not there, Mm-hmm. And so now that I'm there, I'm grateful, I'm appreciative. Every day I wake up, I'm so delighted to get up and go do what I do. I realize it is a privilege beyond, because there's no one doing this at the age that I'm at this level. There's a handful of people, if there are any, that are doing this at this age. So I recognize that I'm certainly on borrowed time, but yeah, the perspective is quite different. The level of appreciation is quite different. And so how I manage this opportunity is certainly different than how I managed it as a 25-year-old Phaidra, right? Yeah. And so it's just, word to the wise, it's not going to last forever, whether you're 20 or whether you're 45 or 50, right? It won't last forever, but you take each day, and you really, regardless of where you are and what your age is, you take each day like it's your last. You live it to the fullest. You be the best person you can be. You train as hard as you can on that day. It may not be as hard as you could possibly over the span of 5 days, but you just do the best with what you have, and you just have gratitude and appreciation for it. That's something I think, regardless of age, that we can all kind of learn how to do, and it just creates a better experience altogether.
Yeah, because my first World Cup as a professional was when I was 17. So I was a senior in high school, and I got to go travel. I qualified. I got invited and went and raced a World Cup. I was in Canada for that, and I think it might have been like 3 years before there was anyone else younger than me on the World Cup tour, and so I was like always the young gun around. And when finally I was like, oh, there's like some young dudes here now, it kind of hit me like a couple of years in. Like I definitely appreciated it. I was working hard, and I gained a lot of experience because most of the guys I was with, my teammates from the US, the closest age was 10 years or 7 years to me. No, 10 years to me. 10 years was the closest in age. It was a 27-year-old and I was 17. And that's how old I am now. And the other teammates were all older than him. And so I gained I had to kind of mature just to be part of the group. but like that internal dialogue of kind of understanding didn't take place for a few more years. So younger guys started showing up, and there weren't any really Americans, but on the tour, there was European guys that were younger. And I was like, okay, and I had teammates retiring, and I was like, oh, now the clock is ticking. I'm not 17 and just like crossing my fingers and hoping to be the youngest World Cup winner. Like I gotta go and earn this thing. And that I remember that kind of that shift when I realized that there's a time limit on it. And now with our Olympic cycles, I think I understand that a lot more when you're like, okay, 4 years, I'll be this age, another 4 years. Ooh, that's pushing it. I don't know if I can go 12 years. That's crossing your fingers and hoping you can make it to there. There's no guarantee at that point.
I think it's interesting because I think it's important to not look too far ahead, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Taking in increments of 4, or even taking an increment of 1, right? You can have the end goal to make the Olympics, but you can only do stuff one moment at a time. And what I've learned and what I can impart upon you and everybody else here is, I'm 47 years old. I'll be 48 in 2 months. And I certainly, with a great deal of confidence, and this is not arrogance by any means. I know that I can fight at the pro level, and I think I know I can fight at the highest pro level. Now, a matter of getting in based on other circumstances and obstacles is a whole different thing. But in terms of having the ability, being in the physical shape to do it, and it starts with just how you take care of yourself, right? And I know we're going into a different topic, but it's taking care of yourself. It's bringing in the proper recovery protocol. So you can do things. You can extend things out.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's important to manage it kind of one in smaller increments, so it doesn't become so overwhelming, right? But
yeah.
I just add that.
Well, and that's even part of finding that first bullet point. Who are you as an athlete? Because in the last few years, I feel like I've really gotten serious about. I mean, I was always taking recovery seriously. I'm a private athlete. I was competing against teams that had doctors traveling with their teams, and physios and massage therapists and their team trainers. And I was kind of just watching, just from a distance, seeing what they were doing and trying to do my own research to see how I can recover on my own. And I was learning a lot about physical therapy, but just how to take care of myself so I can compete at the best I could. And it's funny, like, small example is like, I remember when I first found the foam roller, and it was 2 years later before foam rolling was a thing. And I always like kind of give myself a pat on the back, like, yeah, I heard about that real early. But in the last few years, I've really implemented that, my diet, finding what works for me, my training. I've like really upped that, gotten way stronger, gained the weight I want, have like the body composition and power. It's always trying to reach another level, give myself all the advantages I can. But I find that the mental side of that is sometimes the hardest part to commit to, like keeping that consistency and that discipline. I always have trouble gaining weight. And so just making myself eat is a fight a lot of days. I eat a lot already, but my body, I want to be heavier because I'm in a gravity sport. And I have to push myself to get to that. But it's a task, but it's a mental side of that. And I think that's starting to kind of develop or identify the athlete that I want to be. And I set a goal as the athlete I want to be. And then I find, on the third bullet point, friends and teammates, the team I surround myself with helps me discipline myself. There's teammates that when I have a day that I don't feel like training, which is not often, but sometimes you're tired or whatever, and they're like, hey, we're going, let's do it. And a teammate's a great person to have for that, or someone who's in the trenches with you. It can be tough sometimes with a superior or like a coach figure, because you kind of get that. I'm a stubborn guy, so I tend to get that little like chip on my shoulder resentment when I'm, oh, don't you tell me, like, you didn't train this morning, you don't know how my body feels now. Then you have a teammate who's like, yeah, I was at training, like I'm sore too. Let's just do it. And yeah, that's having those teammates around or people around you to really pick you up and keep you going. And then you do the vice versa when they're having their days. I think it's important to have that balance of just trying to support each other and push each other and surrounding yourself with the right people to get the best out of you.
Have any of you heard the term "an athlete dies twice"?
An athlete diets twice or dies twice?
Yeah.
I have heard that. Yeah.
Well, I guess you guys, all of you have a different, because you all went to another sport from the first sport. So I guess that doesn't apply to you guys. You guys transcend that. but yeah, that's why I bring it all together, what you guys were saying. Jerry, you had anything to add to that before we go to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say in terms of like, who are you as an athlete? Does it athletic defeat become a personal defeat? Yeah, I don't really take it that way. I kind of think of my identity starting this sport a little later. I went to college, law school, everything before I even started the sport. And really the reason I got into it, I missed the competition, and I just really, my dream, my why was to represent Israel internationally. So yeah, if I don't slide well, I want to win, obviously, but I remember the reason I'm there is to represent my country. And every time I race, I'm doing just that. And yeah, just by doing that with gratitude and a smile on my face, I'm being successful. I'm doing what I came out to do. Winning's nice, but if I came in 8th place or 2nd place in a race, it's the same person the next day. I look at the people that are walking around moping after coming in 2nd place because they identify themselves as a champion or whatever. And I just think I don't want to be around them. I don't want to be them, compared to the guy who's still sticking with the sport in his 40s, even though he missed the Olympics by a technicality 8 years ago, and he's still trying, and he's always happy just to be there. And I'm like, that's what I want to be. And he's representing his country well. And that's how I identify myself. I'd be disappointed in myself if I embarrass my country, and it's never because of performance. It's how you carry yourself. So just as long as I put in the effort, I could always live with the results.
A good take on it. The interesting take too, that you came into it after, so that is much different most people. But yeah, so I guess that take us into basically kind of what you were saying, like adversity and whatnot, mental toughness. So I talk about this term a lot, and it's probably one of the most used terms in sport, but I think it's one of the least understood, because a lot of people say you either got it or you don't. And by that logic, I should be out of a job because I want you to perform better cognitively, mentally, and be better. So if that's true, what am I doing here? But basically, I always say it's like a skill. It's like you train your fitness, your strength, your endurance, your skill-based training. You need to train your mental toughness. But a lot of times people say how. And the simplest way I could put it is, like, people talk about comfort zones or stepping out. And I use an analogy of like, don't just step out, build a new one, because you're going to have to toggle between what's comfortable and what's not. Because like Phaidra said earlier, there's some days you're not going to be there. That's okay. But you got to know sometimes I got to be there. And when you can toggle between those, that's what makes I feel a healthier athlete overall. Also with the not failing part of, people say, oh, being mentally tough is not being afraid of failure. It's not necessarily being afraid, I think, because we all have that. We're all former athletes, and you guys current athletes. And it's like, you're going to fail, but can you keep going? So I guess what I ask, how do you guys go about, like, what makes you think mentally tough yourself, and what are ways you think those who are watching could improve their mental toughness based off what you've done or learned throughout your careers?
For me, it almost goes back to my last answer. It's just having that reason in between why you're there, and using that to push yourself through hard times, and having the perspective that it's not, your identity's not tied up in your performance that day. And, worst case, I mean, kind of in all of our sports, there's always the worst case where it's like actual bodily injury could occur. But in terms of just like your performance itself, nothing changes based on how that goes. And I think having that mindset, and knowing that you could always overcome whatever happens, and you've done it before, and you have nothing to lose. I think that helps you in terms of being mentally tough. The people I notice who crack are the ones who are scared of situations because they're so worried about the results.
Yeah, and looking at this this list, it's funny, like the little light bulbs that go off about some like stuff that I see kind of every day in my training or my life. And yeah, I mean, Jared's a similar situation where we're private athletes, and I think having the perspective really changes your attitude or how you're mentally going through stuff. So like as a younger athlete, like I had to, I didn't have a national team support. So I had to figure out a way to get sponsors to support me and go do the thing, like have the time to train, to get to the level I wanted to be at and go to the competitions I wanted to go to and compete at the level I wanted to compete at. And so I had to get out of my comfort zone, like the bottom number 2, this talking to people, networking, conversing. And as a young athlete, I could see that I was having to talk to people who were much older than me in the business world or whatever it was, just to try to get some support. Or and I would see athletes that were at a similar level that I was, but had a national team support that never had to worry about that. And yeah, it would be nice to not worry about that and just focus on what you had to focus on a competition level or training level. But I was looking at it as I'm learning a different life skill that's going to help me now and later in life. As you were saying, Nick, that like that when the athlete dies the first time, when my competition and my athletic career is over, I have a skill set that some other athletes that I compete against might not have. And so I was always trying to find a perspective to appreciate the things I was going through, and the challenges I was facing. And like an easy way, actually, or easy in parentheses, I don't program it. My trainer, my physical trainer, programs in mental toughness workouts. There isn't really a goal that's going to make my bench PR increase or my back squat or whatever. We just have these brutal mental workouts where a lot of times it's with a really heavy slam ball, and it tends to be these bear hugs where you can't breathe. You're squeezing a 150-pound slam ball against your chest. And if you drop it, you're running, you're doing burpees, you're doing something else. And it's just like, can you keep holding on? And when you when you let go, you have a little bit of a punishment, but you come back to the ball, you pick it back up, and you see how long you can go the second time or the third time. And I had one of those yesterday. And those workouts are always, I get so much out of them, even it might not be on the physical side. Mentally, I always feel so great after that. Like I feel like I've really accomplished something, pushed my boundaries mentally, kind of see what I'm made out of. And yeah, I think that pays dividends into my actual competitions. Going into those, I'm just like, yeah, you can build your own confidence, and yeah, it pays huge.
Yeah, and the mental toughness, reflecting back probably to my rugby career, and I started playing rugby in law school also. So, and had to fund my career really, even with the US, I mean, to some extent. So, I worked full time, I trained full time. So I carried, held down 2 jobs. So this is nothing new for the two of you. You've experienced this as well over your careers. So developing mental toughness, I almost feel like we kind of got fast tracked in that, just because it was just inherently a part of what we had to do in order to do what we wanted to do, right? We had to do it to do what we love. And I'll say I'll definitely add this piece. I know as a female athlete, it's different, right? For most, not in some situations, right? Because we're less funded. We get, by and large, historically, we've been less funded. We get less media attention, things like that. So, we've been in the trenches. And so it's just the mental toughness piece. We develop it, and it's just, like I said, it's inherently a part of what we do, and so that allows, I think it may give some sort of advantage in some ways, because you can kind of cope with whatever, right? You can just kind of take things as, okay, this is just a part of it. And when you develop that sort of capacity, it's awesome. You know, if it doesn't kill you, it can only make you stronger. And so that's the attitude I've taken on, you know, in sports, in life, is when things are thrown at you, you just, you dodge them, you take what you can take, the things that can bring value. You let go of the other things, but you just kind of ride it. And the more, I guess, adverse, the more you can be calm and cool in an adverse situation, which comes again from many reps of being in that situation, the more better you can perform under those circumstances. And so at the end of the day, there's no, and I know with MMA, when we're training, to bring it to MMA, we you know, when we're sparring and training, we try to present every possible scenario so that there's nothing, even if it's just visualizing, there's absolutely nothing we're going to experience in the octagon that's going to be different, that's going to be new. You know, much like you say, the 150-pound med ball, we sit there and we don't hold the med ball, but I know when I'm visualizing, sometimes I visualize losing, so that when I am in the octagon, it's not like I'm going in with the mindset to lose, but the reality of it is it could happen, just like with anybody and anything. And so, you know, when you can visualize it and actually feel it in your bones before you know, get into a fight. And if you do come across that moment, or if you have a bad round, again, it's something that's so familiar to you, it's nothing new. And so you're able to kind of rise above it and possibly pull it out in the third round or the fourth round or the fifth round. So yeah, it's again, I think the three of us have probably experienced quite a bit of adversity, and just to play our sport, to do what we do and to do what we love. And so mental toughness is something that just has been interwoven into our experience inherently. Right. So
the funny thing is, like, people always ask me, since I've worked with all of you guys doing mental training in the applied sense, people always ask me, are athletes better? And I always say yes, but it depends. And all the things you three just said kind of goes into that, because you see the little bullet points at the end, the 1, 2, and 3. Everything you guys just described are those. How many new unfamiliar tasks have you attempted this week? These are just little tips I tell people to do in their day-to-day, but you guys literally experience that when, like you said, you have to throw these things because your brain wants to adapt, or not wants that, it doesn't like to adapt to new things, so you have to force it to be repetitive. And just like what Tyler said with the med ball, if I get into the brain science of that, that's the dopamine response, because like you said, it's a goal. It's not necessarily, can I lift all the weight in the world? It's that I set a goal, the dopamine hits, it responds, goes up, and then you get through it. And then your brain says, I need to do that again, and I can make it. And it's just reinforcing that over and over. And that's all really, like, there's more to it, obviously, but that's what mental toughness is, reinforcing that you can keep going. And you guys definitely illustrated that. So the last part of this is kind of like not necessarily a lightning round. It's about 5 questions, and you don't all have to answer each one, but if it resonates, you can either pick, or you can just say which one you want to answer, because I always want to end it with some kind of like a controlled Q&A versus asking just people to chime in more. So these different questions, I'll read through each one, and you can just see what hits home for you maybe. So how do you keep going when the odds are stacked against you? What is advice that you've received that you'll never forget? This could be from just life, could be from a coach, could be from your mom, whoever. Where's a time where a mental health issue, how'd you deal with it? So this is a big one, obviously, because this is the main idea of like how this encapsulates us all as a performer, and advice that you can maybe give coaches, because we had coaches watch this, and a lot of coaches I've noticed sometimes don't know how to address their athletes. And then I guess we don't have to do the last one, because we kind of touched on that with the athletic identity with life beyond sports. So just the first 4, if you want to chime in, like I said, 7, 17, so I don't know if you're pressed for time, but either way, whoever wants to answer the first one, like I said, you can take at it how you want.
I'll take a stab at the first one if that's okay. And sorry, I'll be quick. Don't worry. How do you keep going when the odds are stacked against you? It seems like ever since I started playing sports super competitively, like the odds have been stacked against me. I started playing rugby at, I think, 22. And the odds were stacked against me. I rise through it. That kind of stuff makes it's fuel for my fire. It motivates me. And so now I'm staring at the biggest odds of me being successful I've ever stared at, right? Because of just simply age. And I'm just motivated to do it. I put every bit of everything into what I'm doing because I absolutely believe that I can be successful. And, I think something to take away is that, if there's something inside of you that's fueling you, there's something I just believe and is within me that just keeps me going. But if there's something you absolutely believe in and you believe that you can do it and you are willing to put the time, energy, effort, and be smart about your approach to it and can surround yourself with the right team that can help move you to that destination, then why not, right? If you fail, so what? You fail. Your failure is a transition to success somewhere. And it may not be in the destination that you have originally, on your GPS, but you will be successful and you will open a door to something else that you're probably meant to do in a place that you're meant to be. So the odds are the odds, right? It's a statistic. It's a number that can very well be defeated. And so just keep going.
That's a lot of bars.
Yeah, and I think I was kind of wanted to mention it, I think, on a couple different spots, but it also applies here is when, that's similar. When the odds are stacked against you, I kind of like to, and it can go day to day depending on how you're feeling. And we kind of talked about that earlier as well, but I like to almost assume a persona sometimes. If I really feel like the odds are against me, I like to put the chip on my shoulder. And that's how I can approach a training session or a workout or a competition. And I try to embody almost that persona and really ride it for all it's worth. Or if you're feeling like things are just rolling your way, then I just lean into that. And I kind of find what's going to keep the motivation high and the will to keep going. And sometimes I've talked to a lot of distance athletes because in my sport, we're going 1 minute at a time to 1:15. We recover, we go again. And in a short sprint like that, and a lot of times my training is very similar to my competition in ski cross. If I'm in the gym going hard in a HIIT style circuit workout, I allow myself to go to a dark place. Think about losses. I have a TV in my garage gym, and I play like a little highlight reel of races. Some of them are good heats, some of them are bad heats, and there's no bigger emotion than in the finish when you don't succeed. But that was in December or January or February, and so I'll replay that and try to tap into how I felt in the finish. If I'm not feeling that motivation, I'm like, oh, that sucked. I don't want to feel that again, but it happened. And now I'm kind of reminded of it, and I'll use that as some fuel. And then I watch good races, and sometimes those are the ones that get me back in sixth gear, full throttle in a workout or whatever it is, or whatever I'm doing that day. And so, and I think that's just the way I kind of try to navigate the odds against me feeling. It's going to be frequent, but sometimes it's fun to have that underdog. There's not that many movies about teams that are the favorites. There's a lot more movies about teams that are the underdog. And sometimes it's fun. It's a lot more fun to be the underdog.
We have a question actually from a viewer, so I'll ask this, and whoever can take it. Maybe Phaidra, because he actually know this guy. He's a mixed martial artist as well, but yeah, I guess anyone can take it. But he said, when it comes to dealing with anxiety, how do you deal with the reality of difficulties ahead versus being able to believe in yourself? So this dealing with more so anxiety and overcoming it and believing in yourself.
So can you repeat that question? I'm sorry. Oh, I see. When it can deal with the reality. You know,
I could hit
yeah, you go
one
for
thing.
it.
That just came to me real quick when I read it. I think the easiest advice would be to just kind of find one task at a time. I spent a lot of my life on the road, and there's a lot of times where we're like, for example, going to the Olympics, I had to pack to go, and I was going to be gone to a couple of competitions after that. And it's one of those things where you're like, I have so much to do, I don't know where to start. But then you just tick off one thing and you kind of get the ball rolling. You tick off another thing. And I would say that's it's a simple example. Packing a bag is very different than like going for a life goal and achieving your dreams. But at the starting blocks, you just got to start. You got to do the one thing that's going to get you going. And then that ball starts to roll and you kind of can start seeing things come into the picture. Like, okay, this is on the list now. This is on the list now. Okay, I got to hit this. I got to do that. And I think you start to build momentum. You start to build confidence. And the adversity starts to feel a bit smaller as you get that momentum going. And hopefully that kind of maybe that got it. You had a second to think of something while I was riffing there, Phaidra.
So I could say, kind of building off what you said, the checklist idea. So for me, think of it as a whole. For example, this year, Olympic qualifying, I had to go to a lot of new tracks I hadn't been at, and it could seem very overwhelming. You're thinking about the whole track, showing up the first day. I don't know what to expect. Everything's coming at you at 80 miles an hour, which could be an analogy for a lot of things in life. And my coach this year, the way we approached things was to break it down. Like first day, I only had 3 days of training to learn the track, 3 runs a day. First day, there's 20 curves. First day, curves 1 through 5. All you think about, get it right. I don't care what happens the rest of the track, and just get that perfect. Next day, 5 through 12. Next day, the rest of the track, and just kind of approaching things that way, instead of if you went every day and was like, I got to nail this whole track, I got to do it right now. It's never going to work out. You're going to plateau. You'll never get better. But kind of attacking in segments, and that works for anything. Like definitely with my real work, any training, whether it's lifting, actually sliding, and pretty much anything in life. It could be a social thing or any problem you might have. I find that strategy works really well.
Yeah, I don't have much different to say. I think, breaking it down, focusing on one task at a time, key. And when you do that, it actually feeds into your ability to really believe in yourself. You can believe, you build confidence organically, in increments, progressively, right? So I 100% agree. It's not about biting off everything at once. It's about taking little bits and pieces one moment at a time and having success in those moments. And that will, I think, ultimately build your bank of confidence, which is that belief in yourself. So
building that bank of confidence. I like that. So I guess what we'll do, this is how we'll do it to finish off, so we'll be still in the time frame. I'll just assign it like teacher style. So Jared, you'll get the next question, Tyler get the third question, and Phaidra get the last question. Any advice? So I'll do it like 1 minute lightning round. Ready? Go.
All right. So some advice you received that you'll never forget. I actually have it here. Former athlete who went to the Olympics before me for Israel gave me this advice. This is my gold tree from my first season sliding. And you could use this for everything, whether it's even within it, just for my fundraising that I need to do, weight training, sprint training, actually sliding. And everything leads up to my ultimate goal, which I already mentioned, was to be a positive influence to people around the world, to support Israel. Just having this was a complete game changer. And then even breaking it down from like a day-to-day schedule, what I need to do each day, week, month, and then big picture Olympic quad would be the on the macro scale. So that's the best advice I've ever gotten.
Nice. With 10 seconds to go, that's that track speed in you. That's a high school state champion 400-meter dash right there. But And I guess I shouldn't have just threw it at you, Tyler, because I know this question, the mental health one, may be a little deeper. So if you feel comfortable, you can if you want to.
I can give it a shot. I was having a little trouble trying to think of a specific time. I tend to maybe feel a little, maybe not feel, but I tend to be a bit overconfident. So I don't ever feel like I really have any big defining moment that my mental health was an issue. But I guess I can speak on a lot of athletes recently that I got to know when I was in Beijing. I didn't really know this, where there's a lot of people talking about the Olympic hangover. And I had a big crash at the final competition of the season. I was in Switzerland 2 months ago and still having a bit of stuff with that. And I definitely had like an Olympic hangover. I've been going hard for the last 2 years between just full summer training. My competition schedule is super long. I'm away from home almost all the time. But I guess, yeah. So now I'm currently dealing with that. And the way I'm dealing with it is just getting kind of back into the groove of training. I took a break. I had to let my body recover. I kind of accepted that. And yeah, I guess it can even lean into Jared's thing, as you just kind of have your list and your things you got to do. And part of my list was like accomplishing a couple goals outside of my sport. I started shooting bows a couple years ago. That was a new thing that I've always wanted to kind of get into. And at the week after the games, I booked a deer hunt on Lanai on the islands in Hawaii. And I was just like, I got to go do something new. As a professional athlete, I hate being bad at things. So I've been working hard at shooting my bow, and I came back and my shoulder was a bit messed up, but I had to kind of get the strength to shoot straight and have a good shot. And I was successful, and it kind of I was like, okay, now I'm ready to go. And it had nothing to do with my skiing. Really not that much to do with my actual training, but I just kind of took a step back and just refreshed, hit the refresh button, tried something new. When you're new at things, you can get really good or a lot better at them quicker than when you're a professional in a sport. It takes me a month to get a 10th faster, which would be awesome. I'd love to be a 10th faster once a month. That'd be a lot of time that I'd be cutting off. But when you start something new, you can get that big momentum. You're like, oh, I'm learning a lot really quick. And it's exciting. And so I think that was a big part of dealing with that Olympic hangover from this season.
I think you handled that question perfectly. So you like to be good at stuff, and that was a good response, because I remember when we met, you're the only one on this panel I haven't physically met. When we first started working in, I think, June of last year, almost a year now, you had just left to go to Sweden.
Yeah.
So like dealing with that, it's like, even though you're not in solitary confinement, it's like you're confined to a region for months that you don't really know as well, or you can't see your family and friends as much. So like with that Olympic hangover and getting back to the simple things, I think that's a pretty good way to handle it. But yeah. So last but definitely not least, Miss Phaidra Knight, any advice to coaches dealing with their athletes' mental health and or personality? Because that relationship is very key. You all talked about your trainer, coaches, and I think you're all in sports where you need multiple, because more team sports, you're usually going to be with your position coach. But you guys, you're dealing with the skill coach, the strength coach, nutrition, the techniques, especially for you, Phaidra, you have like 5 different skill sets you got to learn. So yeah, how do you deal with that, or any advice to dealing with athletes and personality and mental health?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is for coaches is that every athlete is uniquely different. They bring their own unique baggage of mental health challenges and their own personality. And so, how one person deals with a weight cut can be completely different. And all these things factor in. Mental health, even physiological, like construct, it will factor into how that athlete reacts, how that athlete's what that athlete's disposition is during a certain set of circumstances. And I think it's just really important to recognize that and have that flexibility, have that tolerance, if you will. It's one person is not the same as another person. And so I think it goes without saying. I think that I know it's pretty general, but I think it's something that you can apply to any real circumstance, is that you just need that as a coach. You have to have that flexibility. And when you're coaching teams, it's a lot to manage. But that's the part of the responsibility and the gift of being a coach is being able to adapt and being able to have that range where you can work with an array of different personalities and an array of different potential mental health challenges and mental health issues that may come about with each athlete. But you can't be cookie cutter. You cannot go into a situation. I think it's detrimental when a coach applies, one for all, because the mental health it's a very delicate situation, and you just have to address it and approach it very individually. So that's
very good advice. Like you said, it's general and cliche, but we are all different. And I've noticed it, like I said, from my perspective, being more on the coaching training side, I see it all the time. I try myself best not to do it, but I see it with other coaches. They sometimes compartmentalize all the athletes as this or that versus saying, okay, Johnny or Jimmy or Lisa, they all have the same capabilities, but maybe I had to talk to Johnny a little different or Lisa a little different. I ought to be a little harder on Lisa versus Johnny. I need to dial back a little. So yeah, that's definitely important. So we'll wrap it up. So I'll actually take a page out of the great Phil DeRue's book. He always closes his podcast with a quick sentence or even a word take home. So we'll go down the line. What do you want to leave these people with? Like I said, it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. Final thoughts or final words. You set it off, Jared.
Oh, okay. I was waiting for Phaidra to do it. My advice is to work with Nick. He was a great teacher for me. Just great with getting my mindset right. And it was kind of, I think TJ mentioned this a while ago now, like maybe 20 minutes ago, about putting yourself in situations where you need to overcome and get out of your comfort zone. And I would recommend everybody should find a way to do that. Like, for example, when we would do things where I would just kind of nail everything and I was the best at it, it's kind of fun. But what I knew was good for me was when we do things that I was struggling, like I couldn't even get the words out or whatever. I was like, okay, I have a lot to work on here. And that was actually looking for things like that in every aspect of your life is more gratifying than just, going through doing what you're good at all the time.
Nice. Thanks for the shout out too.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of stole my thunder. I was going to do the same thing. Because I've been thinking about it a lot lately, actually, is one of the benefits. It's kind of outside, it's connected, obviously, but outside of, I guess, the mental toughness or health and that kind of side, but that cognitive side of a lot of stuff we worked on. I noticed it through our training and programming, but I had one moment where it really registered like the benefit. I was in France in December, and there's a turn that's super icy, really rough. Feels like your brain is bouncing around in your head. Your eyeballs can barely stay on. You're making this turn at it's like 120 degree turn, and you're going 60 miles an hour in, and you turn the opposite way. And all three guys and myself are all there at the same time. And I noticed it in my first heat there. I made a double pass. I went from third to first, I think, in that turn. And I just had these moments where I was like, my brain's crushing it. Like I had the peripheral. I could see everyone. I felt like Robert Downey Jr. and Sherlock Holmes. Like I knew what everyone was going to do before they knew where they were going to go and what they were going to do. And I literally, I think I even said like your slogan or your catchphrase. I was like, man, got my mind right. And I was hyped. It was such a cool feeling when you have that confidence where you're like, and I guess it's kind of hard to apply to the other sports because at ski cross, we're kind of going the same direction. No one's trying to actually hit me. But I just had this moment where I could see what was happening. And a lot of that small work we did between like iPads, whatever, all the stuff we were grinding through. And sometimes it's kind of hard to see the benefit when you're just like playing a game on an iPad. But like that moment, I was like, dang, that's like, I didn't win the World Cup. I won that heat, but I just had one of those moments where I was like, this was like all those little things, they're paying off because my performance I hit a new level. I could feel that breakthrough, and that was super motivating and really exciting. And yeah, I think that's, Jared touched on it way earlier with perspective. Like if you kind of take a step back and appreciate your accomplishments. Like I didn't get a trophy for that pass. No one called me. I mean, some coaches talked about it, but it wasn't like that's what made me go to the games. It was just like, I had that personal victory. And I think to establish those personal victories, that as a takeaway, I'd say that's something that people should implement into their everyday, just hitting goals and appreciating every day and hitting those goals and making accomplishments, whatever they may be.
Definitely. Phaidra, bringing it home.
Yeah, real quick, just work with Nick. This stuff works. It's I actually feel it somewhat manifesting in my fighting. As I mature and grow in that, but I actually feel it on my commutes into the city every day. When I'm driving, I'm like killing it. And I'm able to like feel traffic and see people and see cars coming in, and
all right, so that's like ski cross.
See the blue lights, right? See the blue lights before they light up and pull me over. So, but it works. It works. And I guess the other parting words are just, what, always shoot beyond what you can see. Like just set a goal that's well beyond what you can imagine, and
Yes.
and continue to like put yourself in uncomfortable situations. You're only going to grow from that. So that's what I got.
All right, so we'll wrap up. Thank you all for coming. I very much appreciate it. I will actually be putting this on YouTube too for anyone who missed it. So these are great words from some great people, not just athletes, but great people. So thank you, everyone. And as I always say, get your mind right.